Hey guys, welcome back. This is Jason. I got Mike here on the other end here with the full Quadrant podcast today. How's it going, Mike?
How you doing? I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. Doing pretty good.
Good.
I just got back from a gold school in Colorado. Had a great time out there. And learned a lot. It was my fourth gold school, so really felt like I'd hit my stride and things were going really well. Had good students, and all in all, it was a really good program. I had a good time. So um,
Awesome.
yeah. What about you? What's new? It's been a couple minutes since we've last spoke. How are things going on your end?
Is going good. I'm just, you know, nothing crazy. Just training dogs. I'm actually about to go up because my daughter's graduating from uh, Reno, UNR.
Nice.
So I'm about to leave to go up there to for the graduation and everything.
Awesome.
Another step in the lives.
Yeah, that's exciting. Congratulations to her and to you guys. That's a big accomplishment.
You've got a few years to go still
Yeah.
before you get to that point.
Not before I get to my own graduation, but my kids' graduation, right? I've already
Correct.
graduated.
Right.
I've got my degree. I'm good.
Yep. But the heat is starting here,
Wow.
and it's it's getting into the point where you have to start training either in the evenings or in the early mornings.
How do you
If you're doing it outside.
yeah, so that's actually a good question. I'm curious I mean, there's a lot of us who don't deal with those elements, and for some people, it's not the heat, they deal with the cold, like the brutal winters and things like that, so they have to adjust their training. Like, what are some climate hacks that you employ to get around dealing with, the extreme temperatures?
Climate hacks is just, I mean, we would train still, when it was like 95 degrees out, but not when the sun is out. Because that's the thing here, it can be 3 in the morning, it's 95 degrees
Yeah,
weather-wise. But you don't it's not humid, right? So you don't feel the heat like other places where the humidity is higher.
sure.
And it used to be years ago, I would have like, the wire crates, not like, the Rufflins or Gunners or anything like that, but the wire ones. When you have those in your car and you have all the windows open, especially here and it's at night, there's the dogs don't overheat
Yeah.
like they would if it's an enclosed crate. So we
Yeah.
would go and train. I mean, at night, it's like 85, 90 degrees, 95. We usually cut it off at 100. It had to be under 100 and we trained.
That's wild.
But we found like there was no, like, we never had a problem with the dogs overheating because we did it either early in the morning or at night after the sun went down.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's I was gonna point out there's in all of my recommendations about, pet ownership, getting the right crate for your dog, sizing it appropriately. I've always steered people away from the wire crates, except for one occasion. And that's where you need maximum airflow to the dog, right? So
Mhm.
in situations where it's either really hot, you can't, or it's just going to be, you're in a place where the temperatures are really hot and you need the dog to have access to maximum airflow. The wire crates are by far the best way to still secure your dog while allowing them the comfort of the most exposure to airflow.
Yeah.
And so that's something that a lot of pet dog trainers don't think about. But those, I mean, like I have my dogs in Rufflins when they're in the home, and if they're crated, they're in their Rufflins. And if you go in there to like fish out a toy or a bone from the back of the crate and the dog has just been in there, it's hot. Like those things
Yeah.
don't they insulate extremely well. And with dogs that are coated, I mean dogs in general, with their fur and their the way they regulate their body temperature, they run hot already, right? I
Yeah,
think what's the temperature of the dog's normal resting body heat or body temperature? It's like 101 or 102 something, right around
I
there. So
can't remember. I can't remember. Yeah,
they already run like 5, 6 degrees hotter than a human does, anyways. And then you add on their coat, you know, those things you need to be mindful of that. So yeah, it's a really good point to remind people that if you've got dogs in a hot climate or even a warm climate, and and you can guarantee that they're not going to like try to get out, wire crates are going to be the best for those climates.
yeah. And there's disadvantages, of course. There's a lot of, I'd say there's a lot more disadvantages to the wire crate than the advantage of the temperature regulation, right? But
Sure.
like now, even in my house, I have Rufflins, um, and I put fans at when it starts getting warm outside. Even
Yep.
though I have the AC in the house, I still
Yeah.
put fans on those crates just because of the fact, just like you said, because it kind of it traps all that heat in there.
Yeah, and it can get really uncomfortable. And yeah, like the hack to get around it is just add forced induction airflow into the crate so it pushes that and circulates their body or the heated air from their body out. So you just have that constant circulation going on.
But that was,
Yeah,
is it better to do like on a computer, right, where the fan pulls the air out? So I know a lot of the crate fans, they pull the air out, they don't push the air in, right?
yeah. Uh, I would say yes, as long as there's a supply of air that can come in. But if there's not a good supply or access of air that can get sucked in, then I would say forcing air in and circulating it that way might be a little bit better.
That's where I thought, like on my Rufflins in my van, they're two door, so one in front, one in back.
Yeah,
And I thought about putting like the crate fans and having one pulling air out and the one on the opposite end pulling air in,
right.
right? So you create that flow of air through there. Maybe I'm going a little overboard on it, but I mean,
Well, I mean,
heat is the worst thing, right? Because it
yeah,
happens fast.
yeah,
So
and the signs are sometimes hard to tell. But with the crates and everything. I mean, those roto molded crates from Ruffland, you can actually take a hole saw and just punch in new holes too, right? Like you can do that and it still retains the structural rigidity to the kennel without
I think
compromising.
they'll give you a template too,
Yeah, will they?
to show you where to punch those if you want more holes.
Yeah, yeah. So
The Rufflin.
yeah, it's great.
Rufflins are good, man. They're lightweight. The doors, I like that the doors come off all the way, so you
Yeah,
can reach in there if you want to clean them.
right.
They're sturdy. And then if you if you're a dog trainer and you train a lot of dogs, there's times you're gonna have to clean out that crate.
Yeah,
You don't want to be lugging a gunner around to try to clean it. The Ruffins, you just pick them up, to take them outside, hose them off, spray them.
yeah,
They're good. I think they're probably the best right now for having dogs um, inside your home even.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And another thing that's like a supplemental accessory for dogs in heat, right? One of those the kiddie pools, right? Like the little round summertime pools that you can have in your yard. It could be an inflatable, or it could be one of the plastic molded ones. Having that filled with some cool water kept in the shade so that the dogs can cool off before and after exercise. Those are, highly valuable.
Yeah. Especially because the bottom of their body is where you want it to be cool, right? The bottom of their feet, the bottom of their belly, more than other parts.
Right,
That'll help them cool them down.
right.
Yeah, I just posted a video, or my wife did, where we went. We don't have a pool, but we rented a pool from a sniff spot, if you know what that is,
Mm-mm.
and took our dogs there so they can swim in the pool.
Oh, cool.
Do you know what sniff spot is?
I have no idea what that is.
You rent your yard out to people that want to bring their dogs.
Oh, huh.
And it's like it's an app, and you can book a time from like 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. and you bring your dogs there. You pay by the hour.
Uh-huh.
And then here, especially, we'll take our dogs to wherever there's a pool,
Sure.
rent it, and let our dogs cool off that way, swimming in a pool.
Yeah.
Except it's funny because Bullseye swims like he's drowning. He's like a thinker. He's like when he swims, he takes his time and like goes. Ton is like, I'm going to destroy the water. He goes full, like as much power as possible. He actually, you know how they tell you teach your dog to find the steps in the pool, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Because the lip of the pool on the side, when there's nothing they can grab onto, the dogs can't get out.
Right.
Han like does a pull up. He powers himself out of the side of the pool.
That's funny.
He's
Interesting.
angry.
Yeah. Um, awesome. Well, I mean, I think we have enough. I know from some of the followers, their profile pictures and stuff, we have a lot of utility dogs, hunting dog enthusiasts, a lot of sport dogs, pet dogs. There's a lot of sport curious individuals, that are beginning to experiment or, uh, you know, test the waters and looking into different sports, AKC, obedience, protection sports, things like that, dock diving, Um, and so I think I think if you are involved in sport, you should be very aware of the ways to care for your dog in those sports. Each sport brings with it a new test on the dog's body. You need to know likely injuries, educate yourself on remedies or things that to do to manage that and prevent things as best as you can at home. So you and your dog can build
That's
up.
and then yeah, and part of that is having a crate in your vehicle, right? When you're going to training. Um, and it's a funny story because we went years ago. We were training. We went to a like a dog first aid class, and it was held at a gun range. So we all brought our dogs and had them in the car just to kind of just sit there and hear, in the background, all the weapons being fired. But there was one guy in the club that did not have a crate in his car. He just had the dog in the back seat, German Shepherd that he had rescued, and then he had the metal bars that go
Yeah.
right behind the driver's seat, right? That go
Right.
across so the dog can't go forward.
Yeah.
Well, we come out and we hear him just like cursing and yelling, and he's over by his car. So we go to see what happened. Well, he had left a bag of uh, Cheetos or something like that. I think it was Cheetos. He had left it in the front seat. His dog ate through the seat,
Uh-huh.
like like there was a big hole in the side of the seat. He ate through and ate the bag of Cheetos.
Uh-huh.
It was crazy. There was foam from the seat. When I say ate, he ate like it wasn't like a little piece so he could go through. It was a good probably 6 inches of seat was missing, and it was all over. And it was ridiculous, man. He was just cursing. We were laughing because he
What
after that he went and got a new vehicle, an SUV, and got to put a crate in it.
another person's dog misfortune is someone else's humor for a lifetime, right?
Yeah, especially if you've told them, hey, you should get a crate.
Yeah. No, I was at training when I was early on when I was getting into dog training. There was this gentleman who had a really pretty high strung working German Shepherd, or a working line German Shepherd, and the dog he was in highway patrol, had him in the back of his patrol car. The dog was not canine. It was just a young dog, his personal dog, but he carried him in the back seat, and there was no crate. It was just cordoned off, for a prisoner transport in the back seat. And the dog had been out to training a few times, enough to know that when he rolled up, he knew what was about to happen. He knew he was going to get some bites, and he was going to do some barking and some jumping and things like that. Anyways, the dog ripped off the door's side panel, and this gentleman, he was losing it. He was like, we got to call and we got to find a replacement side panel because this is my department car. They're going to kill me. Like, and we had told him for a lot, like, I mean, for many times, something's going to happen. And, worst case scenario or best case scenario, your dog gets away with like maybe a minor accident or drools all over the seat, from excitement, or breaks or chews up a seatbelt. But like, he had totally ripped off the side panel to the door, and it was destroyed. It was hilarious.
And that's where, like, we said, I think before we came on here, we had said about um, when, like, if you're training somebody, especially new dog owners, right?
Yeah.
And you tell them things they should be doing with their dog, they don't take your advice
They don't they
100%.
don't take it as they don't take it as dog training information. They take it as your opinion.
I think, yeah, some people do because, so I had a couple that had two puppies they had gotten same age, like very young, like 3 months, 4 months. And they needed some training. And first thing I was telling them, hey, you should have a crate, right? You should crate your dogs when you're at work, when you're away.
Yeah.
It just keeps them safe, right? And it kind of helps with potty training in the long run. And then it keeps things from happening that you can't control. And of course, they're like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then next appointment, no crate. Next appointment, no crate. Well, like the third or fourth week, the dogs ate this. It was a record, like a vinyl record, but it was worth like $1,000.
Oh wow.
Like the dogs destroyed.
Some sort of a collectible item, right?
Yeah, it was a collectible. And then, of course, the next week now they have crates. But it's like I told you a month ago, I don't just tell you stuff just to tell you, like for no reason.
Right.
I tell you things because they're going to be important at some point, you know.
Right.
But it's like, what? How do you, like, speaking of training, how do you make it clear that this is important? And because a lot of times if it's people that have owned dogs before and their other dogs never did anything, right? And
Right.
they look at their new dogs the same as they did their old dogs.
Right.
But we know every single dog is different,
Yeah.
right? And how do you go about telling them, hey, you need to do this? You need to do it not because it will happen, but because it may happen,
Right.
right? And in some cases, it's going to happen. You
Yeah.
tell them, this is
Yeah.
going to happen, trust me.
You've had it when you've had enough dogs, it's you can take it to the bank. This is information you'll need to prevent this issue down the road.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know if I have the right answer, but this is my answer and what I've incorporated into my business and my pet and dog training practice is everything's documented, right? We have very clear instructions that are written down that are sent and shared with the customers that we train and our clients. Because if it's something that's just kind of offhand, like it's like, oh, hey, by the way, get a crate, right? They may not take that as like, oh, this is coming to me in a professional capacity. This is more of just like, oh, FYI, you might want to consider getting a crate. So until you spell it out for them, and the more official, the more official the information that is presented to the client is, the more serious they're likely to take it, right? And so for me, I found that like anything that's like mission critical to having a successfully trained dog through our program, we make sure that that's passed on to the customer in writing so that when an accident happens, where it very likely will, because they're not going to trust it, we can go back and say, hey, look, this is what we said. You had it on paper. We weren't joking when we said you needed to like take your dog out on leash, or or do this or that. And that's what I found to be most effective for me, is like the more official you can make it to the client, the more serious they take it. But if you just relay information to them like tribal information, or the relay of stories and anecdotes, they may or may not take it, very seriously.
Yeah. But I think even with having it written down, right, like you said, you have those people that kind of glance over it,
Sure.
and just like they look at it, they're like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do that. But there's no urgency in what you told them to do, you know?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you can't control someone's like, if they're not interested in following your advice, right? If for whatever reason there's a disconnect between the quality of the advice that you're giving and your perceived authority to be able to give that information, then you're already fighting an uphill battle, which, I mean, so even in that context, you're still better off having presented them with a very clear cut
Yeah,
document saying, hey, these are our recommendations, this is why. You can always explain to them like, hey, this is why, and share those funny stories of like learned experiences, in the past, from saying, hey, a guy left his Cheetos on the front seat and now he's got like a $3,000 car replacement problem, or whatever it is. And but you can never really, I mean, again, you can never really control what other people are going to do with the information they're given, but you can always make sure
yeah,
that you keep yourself safe and unliable, right? You know, I mean, there's Bart has his own unique way of
yeah.
saying that, right?
Yeah.
So you got to keep
In
yourself.
dog training, you must stay.
You can finish it.
We we won't finish it on here. You can go to the silver school and
You can,
and learn it.
yeah, yeah.
I don't think did I don't think he said at the last silver
He
school.
didn't say it. I actually haven't heard him say it that often. It's been a while since I've heard him refer to that.
Yeah. Cool. So what since we're on that, do you have any stories about like training where the person did something opposite of what you said or
Oh man,
misconstrued what you said, let's say?
yeah, we have a lot.
I have a quick one
Sure.
because especially with puppies, I would tell people like keep a, uh like have a leash on your dog and control it in the house, right?
Right.
Just because you don't want to get in leaving your site and going in the other room and chewing something or going to the bathroom, things like that, right? Keep it close to you so you can you're always teaching it something, you
Right.
know. Well, I had to change how I said that because when you're talking to people that train dogs, you might say something a certain way, but when you talk to people that don't, you have to maybe go into more detail. So I remember this one years ago. I told him, I said, you should keep a leash on your dog, right? So if I told you keep a leash on your dog, most likely your first thought is like, I'm going to hold the leash, right?
Yeah.
Well, I told him keep a leash on your dog, and then next time something happened and the dog like pooped in the house or chewed something, and I was like, well, did you have it on a leash?
Yeah.
They're like, yeah. But what they were doing is they were letting the dog just drag the leash around.
Yeah.
I guess they thought it was a magic leash. It would stop the dog from doing things.
Yeah.
So I had to change and tell them you have to, I had to add that you have to hold the leash
Yeah.
because of that one situation where they just let the dog drag the leash around.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, right? When you say something, you have in mind what you're trying to convey, but that doesn't necessarily mean there are people understanding,
Yeah. Exactly. It's like, are they hearing what you're intending them to hear?
which comes to dogs too when you're training them, right?
Right.
Just because you have something in your mind that you think the dog should understand what you're trying to convey or communicate, that doesn't mean the dog understands it. And I think that's where people get into trouble training their dogs, is that the dog doesn't completely understand yet, and they're trying to do something which will lead to frustration because you believe one thing, but the dog is not ready yet. It's not at that point.
Yes.
you know.
I think, yeah, a good example of that is like where we, as the owners, we try to reward behavior a certain way when the dog may not necessarily find our method of reinforcement actually rewarding.
And that's where what you give your dog in that moment can also go to what it expects, right? You can punish your dog with the same, like you said, reward that you would normally give in other situations if you give it at the time when the dog expected something else,
Yeah.
right? And then that's where I was talking to somebody about that, where the variable like rate, not variable rate of reinforcement, but the variable amount of reward, like say one piece of kibble, five pieces of kibbles, two
Yeah.
pieces of kibbles, right? I was thinking, I was like, if you say your dog, I don't think you should give different amounts in the same training session unless you're giving it for better or worse um, uh, behavior, right? Or effort.
Right. Qualitative aspects of the
Yeah.
performance.
But I remember years ago they said like just and they call it like I think like salting your kibble or whatever or your rewards. Like
Okay.
they would have say kibble and then they would throw pieces of chicken in there, right? So when you reached in your bag, you might grab a piece of chicken or you might grab kibble or you might grab a combination, right?
Uh-huh.
Uh, and they were like to keep it random. But the problem is this is what I think. I don't know. I've never heard anybody say it. It's just a thought I have, right? Say your dog sits like the fastest it ever sat, and you reach in and give it five pieces of kibble, or say like in that, say you have chicken and kibble in there. Say you reach in and give it kibble, right?
When it hoped
And then
for
the
chicken.
next rep, huh?
When it hoped for chicken.
No, say it didn't know it's going to get chicken,
Okay.
but
Okay.
you reach in and you give it kibble. It sat the fastest it ever did, right? Or the best sit. And the dog, maybe it knew it, you know, but it sat the fastest it ever did, and you gave it a few pieces of kibble. And then you go again, next rep, you ask for the sit, and it sits a little slower this time, right? And you reach in and you grab a piece of chicken
Randomly.
randomly.
Yeah.
And then the dog goes, oh, when I sat fast, I got kibble, but when I sat slow, I got chicken.
Yeah.
And then the dog starts sitting slow because it expects like the slow sit caused me to get chicken. I want chicken again.
Right.
And then the person's like, I don't understand why my dog's not sitting fast. It can do it,
Yeah.
but it's not doing it. Right. And we know when with dogs and expectation, right, they have tremendous willpower. If they think that sitting slow will get them the chicken, they will keep sitting slow. And they might even sit slower, thinking like, no, I have to sit slower to get the chicken because you didn't give it to me.
Right.
Right.
One
And
fluke
that's where
can derail it.
I think if you want to do the random piece of kibble or random value of reward, right? So kibble, five pieces, two pieces, chicken, steak, kibble. You should do it maybe when you're charging your marker, your clicker. Then make it random. You never know what you're going to get,
Yeah.
right? But if you're trying to convey to the dog that, hey, that was the thing I wanted, and without giving a jackpot, and if you're going to keep training, that's where you may go, okay, your last sit was 75% as fast as I like it. I gave you five pieces of kibble. This one was 100% of what I like. I'm giving you a jackpot, right? Don't go and give it one piece of kibble so you can keep training because possibly that's going to affect down the road how your dog thinks about that one behavior.
And this is one of the many difficulties in the use of strictly training with positive reinforcement only, because that, I mean, it seems so simple, and you think, oh, I'm including beef or chicken in with the kibble, it's going to make my training better. But like you said, dogs are smart and they might find it punishing that on the fast sit they got kibble, when on the slow sit they got chicken or something, you know, a little bit more from the dessert menu, and you cause your own problems. And then also, you know, if the reward, I got to stop saying reward, if the reinforcer is not something that the dog cares to lose, it's actually not a reinforcer, right? It's just filler, it's filler, it's stuffing, it's nothing of substance, because
Mhm.
that's where you find the lack of reinforcement happening, is if you can't withhold it or take it away and cause punishment or a decrease in the behavior, it's not a good reinforcer. And you should probably find something that has that ability to be used to give, to reinforce, and to take away, to punish, right?
Yeah, exactly. It goes to like, does your dog want this bad enough that he doesn't want to lose it either? Right? Yeah, he may want it, but if he doesn't get it, he's like, okay, I don't care. Right? I'll take it if you give it to me, but if you don't give it to me, that's fine too.
Yeah.
Right?
Can I, so along these lines, this is making me remember, I had a private lesson recently with an individual who's doing some great work with their dog, and they're just getting into things on the NePoPo front and modern dog training. And, you know, it's always a balance for me as a coach, right? Coaching another individual who's actually doing the training for their own dog, as to how much I should or should not say in the session, because clearly there's a lot going on, and usually in the beginning there's a lot that they need to hear, but sometimes hearing everything they need to hear can be, either it can be demotivating, it can be confusing or overwhelming, or it can just create just a hodgepodge of a training session. So you have to be very tactful in what you decide to relay back to the actual person who's doing the dog training. And so I said, you know, I said, hey, get your dog out, start warming them up, you know, just like kind of get them in, get their juices flowing, get their muscles moving. And I made the comment that, hey, you know, if you're going to use verbal praise as part of a reinforcement event or a rewarding event for your dog, you should make sure you do it after the mark or the terminal marker happens, so that there's a clear distinction in the dog's eyes as to praise is not the release, praise is actually part of the party that happens after they've completed good behavior. And so they're like, okay, copy that. And then they went right into the next rep. And what did they do? They praised and then they marked in the wrong order, right? And it just goes to show that, kind of along the lines of what you're saying, is, you know, sometimes reinforcement and all this stuff, like there's a lot to juggle, right? And I was sitting there, I was like, okay, I just told him what to do, he just did it wrong. Do I jump back in and let it slide and see if he corrects it in the next rep, or is this something that I jump in and say, whoa, like, and because, you know, you don't want to like demotivate people because they're so excited to be training their dogs and doing things that are going to work for their dog, especially when they see results. So that was just another incident that happened recently that, you know, kind of falls in line with this talk track.
Yeah. I think like with that, it comes down to the where the person is in the learning. Like I think just like with dogs, if the person is just learning, I think you want to do um less precision, right? Let
Right.
them do and kind of like get used to it and liking it. And then as they go and they understand it better, now you add the more like, hey, don't do it that way, do it this way.
Right.
You know, instead of going right from the beginning, no, do this, no, do exactly that, no, do exactly that, exactly that. I think that's where, like you said, the demotivation might come in if you're too strict on the way they do something in the beginning.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
the
it's the same
difficult
thing with
part,
dogs, right? Like if you constantly
yeah,
interrupt
I mean,
they just, you disrupt their momentum, it starts to reflect in their motivation, their hope, right? The hope starts to like get tempered, and then you run out of the gasoline that you need for the training altogether.
And yeah, because they start, and it's not, I don't know if it's, yeah, for some dogs, they'll get demotivated, but other dogs, what they'll do is they'll slow down because they were like, let me make sure I'm doing this right. And you lose the power
Yeah,
in that behavior
yeah,
instead of just doing it as like as strongly, you know,
yeah,
with as much motivation as possible.
right,
And then once you, that's where NePoPo comes in, right? That's why you build the motivation, because then once you have the motivation, now you can go in and fix things.
yeah,
Because now when you tweak it, they're not like, oh, I'm doing something wrong. They're like, oh, okay, I love doing this. Let me do it a little bit differently.
yeah.
Mhm.
This
But
that actually was one of the recurring themes just a week ago, is that the amount of ignition you have, or having a lot of ignition in a dog, can really compensate for a lot of the failures or the mistakes that led up to the point that you're at, and really the solution to all issues in dog training is building more ignition, right? If you've got scars in your training from like bad training, excessive, rough training, or even you don't have enough motivation to do certain things and there's no interest in training at all, ignition is the answer to all of the problems.
mhm. Yeah, and it's difficult with going back to that, like when you correct somebody or when you don't, right? Speaking of people, because you don't want them to keep repeating the same thing over and over again because now it's become a pattern.
Yeah,
So it's a
it's hard,
delicate line. When do you step in and fix it, or when do you let them go? Like,
right? Well, the thing, like, my teaching style, I'll speak to my teaching style. I'm very much like a perfectionist in the things I do in my personal life. I strive. I probably like I go overboard on wanting to like make things perfect. And it's been one of my New Year's resolutions for this year is to make sure that I learn to accept things that are good enough, to get by with, because a lot of times going for perfection really results in never accomplishing anything. And that goes for working with dogs, working with people, business, you know, developing new skills or talents. And so I've been really focused this year on making sure that I don't get in my own way and just allowing things that are good enough to just be sufficient for what I need and stop aiming for that. And it's been really hard, I'll tell you that. It's been really difficult, but it's been interesting to see how much more I've been able to accomplish. And so I definitely think it's something worth keeping in check. Because I know when I train, I err on the side of like too much information. I'm too nitpicky, and I should probably just leave and let be, and then gradually refine the process or the product.
yeah, and especially when with dogs, because dogs will kind of figure it out, right? If they have the motivation,
Yeah,
they will kind of figure out what you're trying to teach them, whether you're good at it or not, like, right? Or whether you're doing something in a certain order. But I do have a story where it's not good to let things go, right? But it's kind of like I didn't know it was happening. So there was a friend of mine that wanted to, or somebody I worked with before that wanted to train their dog. So I went over there. I was gonna just charge the clicker, right? So had two dogs. The one dog clicked, fed, clicked, fed, clicked, fed. It was good. The dog was excited. The other dog was afraid of the click, right? A little bit, not to the point where they ran away, but it was, you could see they didn't like the sound of the click from the clicker.
sure.
But I told her, I go, okay, what's her favorite treats? So she had this bag of treats. Like, this is her favorite. I was like, okay, let me show you. So I clicked, I paused, I gave the favorite treat. I waited a little bit, clicked, paused, gave the favorite treat. I did a few times. I go, okay, now you got it. Now, Okay, now show me. So person did the same thing. Click, pause, gave the treat. Click, pause, give the treat. And the dog was staying there, even though you could see it was like, I don't like that clicker, but I like these treats. So I was like, okay, I go, just do that this week. I go, nothing else, just do that.
Yeah.
Right. Um, so like a week later, I'm at work and I was like, oh, how's it going with the dogs? She's like, oh, it was going good. She talked about the one dog. She goes, but my other dog doesn't like his favorite treats anymore. Right. I was just like, I'm thinking, I'm like, why would that be? You know, how is that possible?
Yeah.
And I said, well, tell me what you've been doing. She goes, yeah, I'm doing just like you showed me. I'd give the treat and then I'd click. I'd give the treat, then I'd click. So the order in which you do something is very important because she classically conditioned the dog to be afraid of the treats
Right.
because it was afraid of the clicker. But that's the thing when you tell somebody, you show them, you have them do it in front of you and they do it correctly. Like you don't have any, there's nothing you can do after that.
Yeah.
You know, if they change the way they're doing something
Yeah.
and cause a problem, which I mean, in that case, it wouldn't be a problem. You just don't use the clicker, right? But it could be something else where it's now it's a problem.
Yeah. These are some hilarious stories too, man. These are funny. It makes me think we should just have this episode just be on humorous, reminiscent experiences from our careers in dog training because there's so much to learn from. Like even the funny stories, like the things that people do that are just ridiculous. There's still a lot to be learned, and you can actually make a lesson in behavioral
Yeah.
science from some of these stories. So
I had another person that same thing. It was perfect for the clicker because they um they had like mobility issues, so it was easier for them to sit in a chair, right, and then train the dog. So for me, the clicker would be perfect. You can, pinpoint behavior at a distance or whatever, and you don't have to do much. But I had to tell that person to stop using the clicker because we'd be out, they'd say sit, and the dog wouldn't sit. And then they'd go like this and click the clicker
uh,
at the dog.
they use it as a
Right.
punishment tool.
I was just like, and the dog, I mean, it was nothing. The dog just ignored it because of whatever they were doing. But I was like, okay. And talking about, like you said, like correcting it, like at some point you can't correct it. You just have to say, okay, let's just leave that. We're not going to use that.
Right.
We're throwing that tool out because for some reason I didn't explain to you something or you didn't understand what I told you.
This so this isn't there's not a lot of teaching behind this, but it reflects a truism of dog training, right? So, Bart always says a dog bites, cat scratches, and a horse kicks. So we were doing some obedience with one of the police canines in Colorado at my Gold School a week ago, and we had it on a platform. What I was doing was I was demonstrating the value of teaching tactile commands for sit, down, stand, right? So sit, you tap the dog on the croup, the dog sits. You tap the dog on the shoulder blades, the dog lays down. You tap the dog under the belly, the dog stands up on all fours, right? So we were doing that with this dog, and these dogs, like you said, they pick things up so fast. And there was another officer who was laying down somewhat nearby in kind of like a curled up fetal position. I think the officer had something something to eat that caused him to have like an upset stomach or like maybe the stomach bug or something like that. So he was just kind of resting and was about 10 feet away from this dog. And this dog was back tied on a platform. And this is a dual purpose patrol canine. So he does narcotics and he does patrol work, and he's had live bites before. But he's a clear-headed dog, very super dog. One of the coolest dog and handler teams I've ever worked with. Like I gotta admit, these guys are putting in work, and this dog was a hammer, man. Anything he saw was a nail, and he was just wanting to just just hammer those nails everywhere we saw him. But again, clear-headed dog. We're up there. We're doing sit down stand, and the dog is just sitting there. And we're like in between reps, and we're just me and the handler are talking. And then all of a sudden, you see the dog kind of start looking around, and he sees this guy on the out of the corner of his eye, curled up in a fetal position, and the dog just goes for him. And everyone's like, ah. And fortunately, the dog was back tied. The handler grabbed the back line, prevented him from getting a bite. And the guy who was curled up, the officer, he like sprung into action, like, and he, I don't know how he moved so fast from being in that position and being like feeling as unwell as he was that day. He narrowly avoided just getting hammered by this dog. And it was hilarious because one, it was safe, and the things I walked away from that is like, always secure your environment no matter what training you're doing, because again, dogs bite, cats scratch, horses kick. And there was no bite equipment. We weren't even on a bite apparatus, and we were all calm. There was no one was yelling. There was no like, and but the dog, I after I had asked, I'm like, had this dog seen a passive suspect in training where the handler or the suspect is curled up, and that dog had seen passive suspects in training and was taught and trained to hammer people that are in those fetal
Yeah.
positions, because they deal with drug addicts and non-compliant combative suspects and things like that. And it was just another teaching moment that like, hey man, like when you're working with dogs, secure your environment, make sure everyone is safe, check your equipment before you use it. Before you bring a new dog onto the field, inspect their collars, inspect their harnesses, inspect the lines you'll be using, make sure they're not frayed out, so that, because had that back tie failed, boom, someone would have been nuked. And we wouldn't have been laughing about it, right?
Yeah, but and that goes to where pictures are important, right? For the
Yeah,
dogs,
yeah.
pictures and context, right? The dogs learn, oh, I've seen this picture before. I know what to do.
Yes.
You
And
guys
he
don't
was,
have to tell me.
I mean, I imagine, I mean, I'm not one to say I'm not a dog psychic here. So I'm not claiming I know what was going on exactly in the dog's mind, but I imagine he's sitting there like thinking, gosh, this is boring. Like tap to sit, tap to down, tap to stand. Like this is lame stuff. I do way more exciting stuff than this. And he just turns and happens to see some dude looking like a non-responsive suspect. And he's like, I'll take him out. Wham. You know?
It's an active dog, right? He's like, you
Oh,
guys,
totally active dog. Like so
you're
much
not telling me what
gasoline.
to
Like,
do. Yeah,
yeah.
you're not telling me what to do, so I got to figure out how to get you guys excited.
Oh man, it was, and
That
it
was
got everyone excited. It was funny.
that was like my
Again,
dog,
it wouldn't
my
have been
Doberman.
funny. It would not have been funny if it wasn't safe. If we had not had a safe, because dogs are dangerous, and even the tiniest. I've seen tiny doodles lace up someone on their mouth and give them stitches, like on the day they're getting their wedding photos taken. Like, and these mini dogs, these, like, even the tiniest of dogs can disfigure people.
Yeah, but that's where like I listen to what Bart said. That says, and there's a lot of times. What I remember, one thing he said is like, never do bite work without protection. You know, but then you see people wearing the suit, not like a sleeve, but a suit jacket,
Yeah, and
and
shorts.
no pants or shorts or stuff like that.
Yeah,
And not only that, they're sending the dog. It's not like they have it on the back tie where you could, or holding the back line where you let them come up and then target.
right.
They're
They're sending
sending
it
the dog
free.
on a person with only a jacket.
Right.
And every time I see that, I think of Bart saying, like his famous thing, Like, that's the point, right? The dog at some point may decide, hey, I don't want to bite the suit this time.
Right.
I'm going to go easier down below.
Yeah.
And now, at worst, at best, you just have a scar at worst. Now you're running to the hospital.
Yeah.
But that's like my Doberman Willow, my old Doberman Willow.
Yeah.
I knew how she was, right? She'll try to bite you. Forget
I,
about the
I
sleeve.
remember. I got a worker one evening. Yeah.
Well, we went to a person that has a lot of experience with dogs and actually has titled dogs in multiple sports, right? And we wanted to do some bite work, and we had uh she was on a static back line, right? It wasn't I wasn't controlling, she was on a static back line. And he came out with no apron, no jacket, no pants, like nothing, right? IGP sleeve, normal clothes.
Yeah.
First time seeing the dog. So I said, hey, I said, make sure you know where the end of the line is because she likes to come underneath the sleeve, like to get you.
Yeah.
And the person's like, yeah, I'm good. So we come in, right? Bark and hold, bow, 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 bow. Told her to bite. She bit the sleeve. And while he's there, I don't know, I don't remember what he did, but she was on the sleeve and she's like, forget this, right? She let go and she punched underneath the sleeve. And I couldn't tell if he got her, if she got him,
Uh-huh.
right? On the chest, like on the stomach.
Right.
But I think she did because he kind of looked. You know, when you kind of look, like I think she got him.
Uh-huh.
But right then
You
I was
look
like,
at the mid to it.
I told you before we started, right? Why do you think I told you? I'm not some idiot that just found a dog on the street
Yeah.
and just told you, like, oh, be careful, she bites.
I
I was like,
can
no, I was trying to keep you safe and telling you she will come and bite you.
can
But then he put up cones, so he knew exactly where the end of that line was.
let me venture a comment here. Now, I don't mean this to be like at all judgmental, but this is an observation I've seen is usually the helpers, trainers, decoys that have that type of bravado in their approach to working with a new dog, especially, let alone just any dog. Those are typically individuals that have not been bit seriously before. Because, and I'll be the first to say, I was one of those guys, honestly. Before my first 5 to 6 years, well, I'd been bit. My first serious bite happened when I was like 3 years into like learning helper work and decoy work. Um, and it was like I got punctured on my lip, so I got a little like I got fanged in the lip. It wasn't serious. It didn't require a trip to the hospital. I just super glued it shut. Everything was fine. But it wasn't until the experience where I nearly hung it all up and just said, I'm done with dogs altogether, where I got bit in the face. It wasn't until that point that I really started taking this work seriously, regardless of the level of the dog, the experience, the maturity of the dog. I take every dog seriously. And even I mean, I walk into a pet home and I take that situation seriously, right? I walk in on a doodle that I'm going to evaluate for dog aggression or resource guarding or any number of other malbehaviors that clients are reporting about their pet. I take that dog seriously now. And I'm like, hey, please put a leash on your dog. Don't let him, just don't let him freely come up to some random stranger. I control the environment so much more. And that's typically what I see is people like that. They have not been seriously injured by a dog, which is fortunate for them, but also it's unfortunate because it does not inform their behavior to be a little bit more safe. That's the downside to it is fortunately they haven't been hurt before, which is good. But the unfortunate aspect of it is that their behavior is still a little reckless, maybe, or unsafe. And that's the problem with it is because being bit was the best teacher I ever had. It taught like it affected so many things. I changed so many things that I was doing that I didn't know I needed to change, and it was just really the best thing for me. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, and it lets you start uh looking at the dog with more detail, right? Now you look at the dog and seeing like, okay, what is going on with this dog?
Yeah.
To see if there's any signs like, okay, I this is a possibility here, right? From what
Yeah.
I look at.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's a it's I understand maybe like the 20 people before had said, yeah, my dog is serious or whatever, but still you should in the back of your mind say, okay, I've never seen this dog. Let me just,
Never take them,
you
right?
know,
Never trust them, right? Like half the time they're making it up because they're just blowing smoke, blowing up their ego, right? And half the time they don't know what they've got on the end of the leash. They don't know their dog well enough to tell you accurately what their dog will do.
I think it goes the opposite. If the person says the dog is serious, usually the dog is not serious. And if they say, oh, it's okay, right? Blah, blah, blah. Now you have to be careful because that dog is just waiting to bite you.
That's really true. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, oh, he's all right. He doesn't really like do too much. Like that's the dog you got to keep an eye on.
Yeah. But that, yeah, I tried, whenever I go to somebody to tell them, what I know about my dog, so that they're prepared a little bit more than just seeing it, for the first time,
Yeah.
um, just what to look for.
Yeah.
But did you have any other stories?
Yeah. From that last school I had in Colorado. First, I mean, it was such a cool facility, right? It was a county sheriff's department. They had been the recipient of a wonderful donor or a wonderful group of donors that really donated. They had this amazing immaculate turf field with equipment, so we had a really wonderful area, fenced in area, secure facility to let some of these dogs go off leash and just put the pedal to the metal and see what they're capable of doing. We also were able to use elevated boxes for training, dopamine box. We did a lot of that. We did tracking on articles, even started teaching dogs to hunt for nails in the ground. And we did classroom, we did scent wheel work. And it was interesting because you saw every dog at their own pace. Some dogs really took off with ignition faster than others. And then others, there were a couple other dogs that were a little slower, but like by the end of the school, their ignition was it had changed. And don't train the dog that you want. Train the dog like we want to train the dog we want, right? But we don't always have that opportunity to train the dog we want. We have to train the dog that's in front of us. And sometimes the dog that's in front of us is not always the dog that we want. It presents us with, maybe it's got less ignition, or it's got some, maybe it's got a, it's stuck in one aspect of its learning that we just have to be patient with. And the other thing was, I learned patience is huge, right? Because in NePoPo, a lot of times it's slow in the beginning. It's actually really quite slow for a lot of people in the beginning, and I think that's what one thing that turns people away from it is because before it takes effect, they give up, or they pull the ripcord and say, ah, this must not be for me. It must not be working for my dog, right? And a lot of times I had to be the one to come in and say, hey, look, I know you're getting frustrated with this. I know you want to see your dog performing better, but you just trust the process, let the dog do. And when the dog learns on their own without being forced to learn, you'll see it pick up. And I'll be honest, I remember speaking to I called my wife after the first day of class, and I was like, she was asking me how it was, and I said, oh, it's going well, but like I'm actually really concerned. We're going to make some progress with some of these dogs. And she just reminded me, she's like, hey, like, this is the same thing you said in your last three classes, right? It's always day 1 and 2. You're like, oh, I don't know if the dogs are going to do it. He's like, because I'm sweating because I'm here and I'm expected to deliver some results for people, right? And really, I put a lot of pressure on myself. And so I'm like, okay, I want to give them a good experience. I want to be able to help them solve problems and fix their problems with their dogs. But more importantly, in the Gold School, we're there to teach people how to fish, not to give them the fish, right? To use an analogy. And it was just a good reminder to me. It was like right around day 3, so Wednesday, middle of the week, hump day of class. that's when we started seeing some of these dogs really take off. Like we were working the unforced force fetch, and then finally some of these dogs were just like really grabbing onto the hold object, and that's where the turnaround came. And then for one dog, it wasn't until Thursday where the dog's ignition really started to take off, and by then it's like, oh wow, you're sweating bullets. And so I learned a lot myself as a teacher. I think the students did learn a lot, but I think for me, another takeaway from that and experience was that, we have to train the dog in front of us, not the dog that we want our dog to be, you know.
Yeah. I think, and also when it comes to that, it also goes where you have to have a goal for the training and for the session, but the goal cannot be you keep training until you reach that goal, because that's where you have to look at the dog too.
Yeah,
You can't just keep going, okay, no, I'm going to make you do this because you should be able to do it,
yeah,
right? That's when you have to stop and go, okay, why is this not working? And say, like you said, maybe I have to come back tomorrow. It might take this dog 3 or 4 days to do it, where other dogs it took one day,
yeah.
right? But when they get it, it'll be just as strong as you won't be able to tell the difference.
Right. Exactly. And to these students' credit, I mean, these students are people who have industry experience far beyond my own experience. I came into the class saying, "Hey guys, it's a humbling experience for me to be here in a position of an instructor, because you guys are in industry, you guys are actually boots on the ground doing a lot of this work in the field and have far greater experience in a lot of things than I do. I just hope that I can maybe be a coach, present some ideas that give you new ways to think about your training that might benefit you." But I mean, they came with open minds, and I was super appreciative of the atmosphere that they fostered, because everyone was there to learn. Everyone was there to help out. We're able to make jokes about the things that we were doing and constantly reminding ourselves of doing. And everyone it was an overall incredible experience. And it was definitely a gold school that I'm going to probably remember uh, for the rest of my time teaching these schools. Is that it was such a positive experience for me. I walked away a better teacher. I know it was the same thing when we co-instructed that school in Vegas this year. It's just, you can't help but not walk away being better in your skill set, having gone through that process, especially if you come with the right mindset. So it's a blessing to do what we love to do and to, spend it with good quality people. So
Yeah.
yeah, really have a good time doing these things. And I'm again, we've got a school coming up in not December, October, out in Texas. We met a lot of great people through the schools and have been connected. So looking forward to seeing some people out there at Marty's facility, right? He's got an
Yep.
awesome facility, super well put together, and really looking forward to work with him. But what are some of the things you've learned doing Gold Schools, and what are some of the things that you enjoy about teaching that program?
Well, it makes you think more in depth, right, about the things you do already, because a lot of times you've reached a point where a lot of things you don't think about what you're doing. You're just doing them, you know.
Right.
Whereas when you're teaching, you have to take show all the steps, right? You have to teach all the steps that you may not think of while you're doing it. You have to break it down so that the person can follow those steps later, you
Yeah.
know. And especially like what you talked about when you're trying to fix problems, a lot of times there's problems that should not be fixed in a day. You know, that's where you have to teach the building blocks, which will later lead to the point where now you can fix your own problems because you have those building blocks, right? You have those steps.
Right.
Uh, and that's the whole thing with NePoPo too. It's, yeah, is there a possibility to fix things right now? Yes. But the power is about the
Process.
foundation and the process and the learning from the dog. And that's why, like you said, the beginning sometimes it's slow, is because the slow part is laying the foundation. And once you have that, the rest comes fast after that, you know. And in the Gold School is like the same thing. You have different people, you have people that learn in different ways, you have different dogs, uh, and trying to figure out the way to communicate those things so that each person understands in their own way. You know, I think that's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
Is that, and then I mean, I having both of us there was in our last school was pretty good,
Yeah.
you know, because we say things differently too. You know, we teach differently. So although we're on the same page as far as the things we're teaching, you know, you say it differently than I would, you know, just because of our experiences. So
Sure. Sure.
yeah,
Yeah. Interesting conversational topics here, leading us.
yeah, it's going all over the place.
I mean, we're about to hit summer, and you're coming out here. I'm hosting Marco for a IGP protection workshop in a couple weeks. That's going to be a lot of fun. We've got all working spots are filled. We've got some really cool dogs. I think everyone's going to have a good time. I'm looking forward to some great conversations, kicking back, and just like really spending a nice solid 3 or 4 days training dogs.
How many how many people are going to be there?
I'll have to check, but I mean, we have working spots. We've got a few audits, probably 15, maybe 15, no more than 20. But that's how I would like it. I'd prefer to have, like fewer people that I know really well than a bunch of people who I don't know so well or don't have the opportunity to get to know too well because there's too many people. So yeah, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be good.
Oh, one thing that was funny, I will say this one of the students had asked about um, how does all of this apply to pet dogs? And I'm like, like this is halfway into the class. And I'm like, it all does, you know? And but that was an interesting thing because I was like, oh wow, I'd been spending so much time talking about applications for like working dogs and sport dogs because everyone there had working and sport dogs, and that it didn't dawn on me that there was still interest in learning how NePoPo applied to pet dogs. So at that point, I was like, it gave me reason to pause and kind of backpedal a little bit so that I can make sure to incorporate conversation about how does clack clack influence dopamine or influence um, how does clack clack and the dopamine box influence pet dogs in their day-to-day lives? How do you use that for the betterment of pet dogs and pet dog training or your own personal dogs that live as pets? How does the unforced force fetch? How does the treat and train, indirect reward, direct reward? How does that all of that come together to make a life with a pet better? And so I was like, really, really interesting question, but it kind of stopped me in my tracks because I was like, oh, whoa, I wasn't really like kind of taking that school with that approach, but it was good. So
Yeah.
it's always
But
good.
yeah, that's when you have your mind set, when you're thinking one way, and then when you're talking about it, you're kind of all your explanations might come through that side, like the working dogs, instead of the pet side, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but that's the thing. You can use that system and tweak it maybe for pet dogs versus working dogs versus police dogs, sport dogs. It's about understanding it and then knowing how to implement it, right?
Yes, absolutely right. And that reminds me of one more story that from that school was there was this dog who was a search dog, a detection dog, and we were doing scent wheel, and we had a scent wheel in one of their facility classrooms, and these classrooms are like huge. They're like 50 by 40 feet classroom, so they're really big. And we had the scent wheel there, and we are just shaping the dog, presenting it with the sample odor in the jar, in the mason jar, and then sending it to the scent wheel and then we would click and pay when the dog, sometimes we would have to successfully approximate the dog getting closer to the right jar, and sometimes we would just wait for the dog with the ignition to go to the jar, and then we'd click it, and he'd come back. And but there was this one dog in particular that had already had some training on it and was already, I think it was already certified as a firearms detection dog. So we were doing spent casings, right? Gunshot residue on spent casings. And the dog was a little bit flatter than what the handler had said it was used to being like in its search patterns. So it was interesting. And after a couple of sessions on it, I was like, you know what? Let's get rid of the leash, because this dog was being super compliant on the leash. And it was like, as soon as you cut that cord, that dog changed into a completely different dog. And so you saw how the dog was trained. The dog, when it was on leash, the leash was a cue to be in utter control, utter compliance, right? Because that dog was walking the school hallways. So you can't just have a dog pinballing off of the locker hallways. But in the training classroom, as soon as we took that leash off, you saw the level of ignition just jump. And it was really interesting. And it's things like that that, allowed us to decide that, like, hey, maybe having this dog just train in an environment where you can allow him to shape, right? Where he has enclosure, or you control the size of the space that he's working in. I think that might be better. And we actually ended up doing that. And we saw that's when the dog really started to make huge improvements. So it was really interesting. There are just subtle things like that that you might not pick up on, might be cues to the dog to stay in a certain state of mind or a certain drive state, right? Like the leash, it was a compliance cue. And
Yep.
as soon as you cut that leash, boom, that dog's like, okay, let's go find my odor so I can find my toy, you know?
Yeah. It's the same as a friend of mine that got a Mal and wanted to be a service dog and wanted to do like IGP stuff. So right from the beginning, I said, okay, I said, get a collar, one collar that you're going to have for IGP. Whenever you do IGP, you put this collar on, right? And I remember it was an orange collar, I think it was. That's when we'll do all the crazy stuff and, bite work and running and, everything that requires energy. I said, but when you're done, take that collar off. I said, when you're doing any kind of service dog training, put on the harness, right? But you have to be diligent, right? You have to do this every single time.
Yeah.
So that dog now is a crazy, like that dog should do IGP, right? It's not a service dog. But when you put on that harness, all the energy leaves.
It's a cue for a different state of
Yep.
mind.
And it is calm in public and just is very stable, whatever.
Yeah.
Once you take off the harness and you put on the other collar, which I don't think she puts on that other collar anymore, but the harness itself is the cue to be calm.
Yeah.
Anything else, the dog is just, energetic and all the energy comes out. And that's the thing is if you are consistent, you and very, very, disciplined yourself, you can, like you said, you can cue the emotion of the dog to whatever you want,
Yeah.
you know.
Going back to reflex response on cue, right?
Hmm.
So to the people
Exactly.
who question whether reflex response is really capable in obedience, I mean, the answer is, if you can get a dog to salivate on a bell, you can get a mind state on a cue, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly the same thing.
So,
And they can't help it, right?
right.
They feel that certain way. I think that's where the thinking is like that thinking can change the way you train because now you look at everything you do. Like you said, that the police dog, he saw the dog that was, I mean, the person that was in like in a fetal position, not moving, passive decoy,
Yep.
and somewhere in the past, that was a cue, right? That became a visual cue, like, hey, I gotta go find this person.
Dude, he almost got lit up, man. And again, I'm beating a dead horse here. It was only funny because we were safe, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the, if it wasn't, like you said, it would be a different story.
Yeah. Yep.
That happened to, that happened with Willow too, where the, we're doing bite work at a seminar, and I was not holding the back tie. Somebody else was. So somebody else was holding the line. I was next to Willow, and then there was a the helper with the sleeve.
Uh-huh.
So did some bite work, what up, some bark and hold, blah blah blah. Gave the bite. He slipped the sleeve, and she spat the sleeve out and went for his leg, right? Because he was standing there,
Uh-huh.
and she would have got him. He was quick, right? He moved his leg out of the way, and at the same time, the back tie pulled her, and then she turned and she's like, "Oh, I see somebody else. I'm going for her." But that's when she took off in a, like, I had no line. I had nothing, like nothing physically to restrain her. But when, as she was going there, and it was a friend of mine also that had trained with her, and we both like yelled at her, like no. And she went and she muzzle punched him
Hmm.
in the stomach,
Jeez.
and then came around and I told her to down, and she downed, and then I went and grabbed a leash. But like like you said, a dog bites, a cat scratches, and a horse kicks. Like Warren says all the time,
Yeah.
you don't know when it's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, good stuff. I think that brings me to the end of all my contributions for this topic or this conversation thread. It's always fun reminiscing dogs, talking funny dog stories. But again, at the end of it, I guess the one note I do want to leave this topic on is like, we can't have fun with dogs if we can't be safe. So, like, and you can't have fun with dogs if they can't be healthy, right? So, the way we started this conversation out was talking about ways to keep your dogs healthy. Obviously, we didn't go into near any, like, we barely even scratched the surface, but like, learn the field that you're in, learn what your dogs are prone to, what you need to keep in mind for to keep your dogs healthy, safe, well, and then dog training can be fun. But dog training will not be fun if you can't meet the conditions for safety, the conditions for health on the part of your dog and on your part as well, right? It takes it takes health and stamina and strength to handle and run a dog too. So from a human perspective, so do what you need to do to keep yourself healthy as well. And with all of those in place, you have a recipe for a really good activity or sense an outlet for fun, great bonding opportunities with your dog. So
Yep,
anyways, but
cool. And this gave me some ideas that I wanted to talk about maybe in another episode.
okay, after we get off this, write them down.
Yeah,
Okay,
I will.
so we don't forget them. Write them down. But we do appreciate everyone who tunes in. I almost said dial in, right? Who
Dialed in. Was it a radio show?
yeah. We're not radio, but
Thank
everyone
you to all the callers for calling in.
we do appreciate all the viewers who tune in to watch our show. We appreciate those who shared it. We appreciate if you'd continue to share it, help us get the word out. We are working on getting these uploaded to the Apple podcast so that they can be streamable. So that's something to look forward to. It's something we enjoy. We don't make any money off of this. This is just something that really Michael and I have done just to record our own conversations, because we figured, hey, we're already talking about this stuff and we end up talking about some really interesting topics, might as well record them. So fortunately, there's no audio or there's no advertising interruptions that you have to worry about. No promotions from us. If we are promoting something, it's because we found it useful in training. So really, this is just all for the sake of the betterment of those that are interested in principles of modern dog training and NePoPo. So hopefully this is helpful to you guys. Let us know. You can thank us by liking, sharing, and subscribing, and sharing this with your friends and family, and your networks. That's how you can pay us back. So,
Especially sharing it, right? Let other people know if you found value in it,
or
you
if you
know,
didn't find value in it, like
or if you think we're stupid.
scream it from the rooftops too, you know.
We don't know what we're
That'll
talking
that'll
about.
still draw attention to it. So, you know, whether you like it or not, share how you feel one way or the other. So appreciate it.
If you don't like what we're saying, then tell the people that you hate to listen to us.
Anyways, all
Tell
right. Well, hey,
everybody.
that's it for another. I think this was episode 9 for us.
Yeah,
That's it
number
for another
9.
episode. It was a really good one. I enjoyed it. Good conversation. Hopefully everyone else enjoyed it as well. All right.
Yep.
Hey,
Talk
take
to you
care.
soon.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.